I'm Sean, the founder of Sheepdog. Normally our account is super fun, really exciting to watch. But this week we're going to slow things down. The Sheepdog name comes from the idea that the sheepdog lives amongst the sheep and protects them from the wolves. When I was 17, I joined the military as a combat engineer, and I became a police officer when I was 21 years old. And I've been a police officer in downtown Winnipeg for 15 years. Last year, we did what I believed was the most impactful thing we've done as a company and sat down with 3 combat veterans to hear about their experience in the military and how it affected them as a person. We're doing that again this year with 3 combat veterans from Afghanistan and Bosnia. We're really excited and super proud that they were willing to sit with us and tell their stories, and I hope you really enjoy it. Well, thanks for coming today.
Well, thanks for having me, Al. I'm a retired warrant officer. My name's Warrant Officer Grant. Well, I joined the Army in 1985, did my first deployment to Cyprus in 1988, and then carried on and did another deployment in 1992 to Bosnia. And then in 2000, I did a deployment to the former Yugoslavia.
My name's Phil Trainer. I'm still in the reserves. I'm a Chief Warrant Officer, currently a Regimental Sergeant Major of the 4th Area Force. Started my Army career in January 2003.
Aaron Pinner, and I retired sergeant, and that was back in 2017, but I joined the military as a reservist in 2000.
I was 22 years old. I was one of the late bloomers when I joined, but my path was going in the wrong direction, and I had to sort myself out, and I thought that was the best career for me. At 22, I was somebody that I had high expectations of. I always wanted to do demolitions. I was always fascinated with explosives and things like that. And prior to joining the military, I actually worked for a company called Maritime Explosives. And it gave me the ability to have a knowledge of working with demolitions and stuff. And then I heard about pioneers and engineers. And so I thought if I joined an infantry battalion and I could be a pioneer, I was still getting some of the onset of being a demolition expert. I do foolish things as a kid, as you all know, most kids do, and I would get myself in trouble. And my father was in the military. He was a Navy man, and so he was away a lot. And when he was away, of course, I would get myself in a little bit of trouble. I realized that I put a lot of stress on my mother, and so I had to straighten myself out specifically for her. I thought the military was a good angle to give myself some structure and to be able to build on that. But when I did actually join the service, I had a full beard. So I was one of the only guys that had a beard. And when I seen them getting their haircuts, I knew what was going for me. So it was a little depressing.
21 years old, so a bit older than most of the people that joined, but not old. My grandfather was in the Second World War, but he died when I was about, I don't even know if I was 3 or 4. I was like 3 or 4 years old when he died, so I didn't really get to know him or talk to him about it. I don't know if it was G.I. Joe. I don't know if it was playing with Little Green Army Men, but something was always in the back of my head. And I think I just ended up at the right career fair one day, and there was a booth, and I kind of figured out what the reserves was all about. That was also kind of post 9/11 too, so that was all going on as well. Like that was, probably just over a year after was when I'd been going through the application and looking at all that stuff. So that was probably part of it too.
I was 18. Aaron was still in high school. Aaron had failed grade 10 and was behind by 1 year. And so I was in high school, and I remember my dad going, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I don't know." He's like, "Well, school's coming to an end. Like you're going to graduate." I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Well, you got to get a job." So he just plops down this recruiting book in front of me, and he goes, "Start filling it out." All right. Now I was, always interested in the military, being a kid and stuff like that. So we always played Army, and I'm like, this should be cool. And so that was the clincher right there.
The first time I was ever completely miserable. I had been in the Army for about 2 months in the actual battalion, and we deployed to Wainwright, Alberta. And we were going on a company patrol. Late at night, it was a long-range patrol. And in orders that we got, which is things that they're telling you have to do. So that's what an orders format is. And they were telling us we were going down to the Battle River. Now this was in late November. There was snow on the ground. It was freezing out, probably minus 18, 20. In orders, they had said, well, you're going to get wet. You're going to go through the swamps. You're going to get wet up to your feet. But then when you get down to the Battle River, they said this group of people called the Pioneers will have a one-rope bridge, which is just a piece of rope strung across the river. They said, as long as you stay against that piece of rope, you're going to get wet up to your waist. So it's November, you're kind of miserable. You're thinking, okay, everybody's got to do it. So we get down to the Battle River, and the first guy that's got to go in the river is our boss. He's the sergeant major. Not a tall gentleman. He was probably 5'6", and he slides off the embankment, goes completely under, and you're looking like, oh my God. And he's swimming across. So you're looking at him going, stupid, just stand up. But he doesn't stand up. And then the next guy in behind him was our radio operator, his radio operator. And he was 6'7", and he was swimming across. And you knew very well that going in that river, you were swimming. And then once we were out of the river, we stood in the woods for 2.5 hours. So we stayed there until first light. We actually put in the attack. There was nobody on the position. It was miserable, snow all over the ground. We're all completely saturated. And then we were told to take up positions, lying on the ground by the trenches, the dugout positions, and waiting for a counterattack. And it was miserable. That's when I thought, what did I do? What did I join? Because I wanted to quit right then and there. In actual fact, there was probably 80% of the company went down with hypothermia in the company.
At the time, we were called reconnaissance crewmen in the Armored Corps. You needed basically 4 courses to be a qualified crewman, like your basic, your SQ, and then they had like a QL3 and a QL4. So we were finishing our QL4. It's like, hey, who wants to go to Bosnia? Yeah, let's go. We need to send they wanted to send, I can't remember, a lot, like a full troop of reservists, which is at the time was like 8 cars, so call 4 people, so 30 something reservists. Yep, let's go. Saddle up, hey mom, hey dad, I'm gonna see if I can go to Bosnia, which when you drop that at the dinner table doesn't always go over great. So volunteer for that. A few weeks, months, I don't know how long it was, gets changed to, yeah, we don't need a troop of you guys, we need 1 guy. And that 1 guy was higher ranked than us, and away he went. So okay. And then, as that would have been 2004-ish. So call it, in the next couple of years, we start hearing about the rotation starting in Afghanistan. And Western area, or 3, now it's called 3, but I think at the time was still Western area. You're lined up for 2008. So it's like, okay, let's go. And that's kind of how that started. I don't remember the exact day that happened, but it was just kind of you're a soldier, and that's soldiering. Deploying, that's your chance to be the soldier and do your job. For real. Stakes are high, but stakes have been high for soldiers for 1,000 years. So now it's our turn.
I remember, so I joined in May, and basic was in Wainwright. So I grabbed my stuff, and I don't think it really sunk in then. But when we hit Wainwright, that's like, I remember saying to whoever's sitting around me, like, this is it. This shit is going to hit the fan now. And it did. Straight off the bus, screaming, yelling. It was like almost like a documentary or movie. It's like, well, that's what we signed up for, and this is now happening. Like, you're screwed. And so that was the moment. I was probably nervous, not knowing like the unknown, like what's going to happen. You kind of get some idea through movies and stuff like that, but how accurate it is, you never know, right? Until it's actually happening to you. So when I joined, I was a cook, and I don't regret those years at all, but I didn't like being a cook. It was not the job that I wanted. The recruiter said the rifles were full because they had recruiting quotas, and I only wanted to be a rifle. And he says, well, you could be a cook or something else. And I said, well, I don't mind cooking. My mom taught me how to cook, so I'll be a cook. How hard could it be? I didn't want to do that job. And it took me some time to actually transfer out and become a rifle. So the Royal Winnipeg Rifles is one of the local infantry units. There's 2 of them. But my eye was on the prize of becoming infantry. I wanted to be pointing at the sword. I wanted to be the front lines. I didn't want to hear other people's stories about how cool it is. I remember as a cook, we were in the field and a platoon came off the line. We fed them and they all fell asleep underneath a tree. And I'm like, that's cool. I don't know why. It just looked really relaxing. It was a nice cool day. It looked awesome. I want to do that. So that's why I wanted to become an infantryman, and I worked hard to come there.
My first deployment was in 1988. I went to Cyprus. It's a 6-month deployment. Yeah, you don't know what you're getting into. You hear things about the Turks and the Greeks and what they did. Well, there was a lot of confrontation between the Turks and the Greeks. They had a lot of conflict. Cyprus was their main objective, and they were taking over that particular island. And so we deployed as a UN force. So we were deploying as a peacekeeping operation. So we were there to basically establish what they call a ceasefire, to stop each group from firing at each other. So we would establish what they call a buffer zone, which is you're basically in the middle of these two sanctions, these groups, and we were there to stop them from fighting one another. But we didn't do it with weapons of force. We were there to put our hands up and say, this can't happen. When you're dealing with people with arms like that and you have nothing to sort of hold them back with, it's a little nerve-wracking. And when you're driving by and you're actually looking at families that are housed in just 2 walls and bales of hay, and it's complete families, and that's what they're sleeping in. And at that particular time, it was wintertime, so they had snow on the ground. And it's heart-wrenching to see that there are people there that have nothing to do with the war, but are involved as collateral damage. And it's heart-wrenching to see them suffer for no apparent cause towards them. We take things for granted here in this country because you're not exposed to stuff like that. But when you get over there, it's a reality check. And you're very thankful for what you have back in your own country, because you're looking at kids running amok around the streets. They're picking up unexploded ordnance, things of that nature. And then you never know if they're ever going to make it home. So it's, as a soldier, and to be able to go over there and sort of contain that and make them safe, it's honorable. It touches you in the heart, actually.
The day I'm leaving wasn't bad to me. A couple days before was worse for me because my family wasn't there the day we left Canada. Yeah, they could have met me, but I was like, you know what, no, just because basically what I ended up having to do, I went out to Shiloh. Everybody that we were deploying all together from Shiloh hops on a bus, come back to Winnipeg, go to 17 Wing, go to the terminal, fly. Our family could have met us at the terminal, but I was like, no, don't bother. Just we'll say our goodbyes and I'll just go. So the day or two, however many days was before that, that was also another day where kind of getting real. Like, I'm not going to say it bothered me, but I don't think I've ever seen my old man cry. That day he was crying when it was finally time for me to head back to Shiloh. I can only imagine now. I'm like, okay, he's thinking that's the last time he's going to see me. So that was hard to see. But the actual day of was basically sitting in an airport waiting to get on a plane. It's kind of how it went.
When we were newer, it was the end of Bosnia. It's like I knew a bunch of guys that had gone to Bosnia, and by that time they had done like gate guard duties and stuff like that. I didn't get a lot of great stories out of that. But we still wanted to do something. You can't just train and not do anything with your life, right? You can't keep training. So we all wanted to go. In 2005, just before Christmas leave, who wants to go to Afghanistan? Well, yeah, I want to go to Afghanistan. I want to do what I've been training to do my whole career. And it was a competition. Like there was guys coming out of the woodwork to go. I don't think at that time, at that very specific moment when they asked who wanted to go, what we thought we were getting into. Maybe we thought we were getting into gate guard duty. Maybe we were going to do some lame job. We were reservists, right? Like, what are we going to do? So workup is like pre-training. It's usually about 9 months. The Reg Force do it. They kind of like hone their skills. They kind of like cater their training more to what they'd be actually doing in Afghanistan. They did have fillers, like reservists come in and fill holes that they can't fill. You have 2 weeks, settle your affairs here, and then a couple weeks in Edmonton, and you're gone. And so that's what happened. I got attached to one VP, our one Princess Patricia Canadian Light Infantry. I joined the first platoon of ACOI. So that was my introduction to even the Reg Force. Like, we didn't even work with the Reg Force as the reservist. I'd never been in a lab before. I didn't even know how to open the door or close the door. No mounted ops training whatsoever. So I think my section commander rolled his eyes pretty big when I first got there. I was like, "Hey, who are you?" "Penner, I'm here, replacing somebody." And they're like, "Okay, well, what can you do?" I'm like, "Well, I can fire a machine gun, and I can fire a rifle, and I can dig a trench, and that's about it." I'm like, "Well, okay, what about all the other mounted ops shit we're gonna be doing?" Well, I don't know that. So it was a bit of a crash course.
First time was in 1992. Went to Bosnia. We landed in Zagreb. When we were coming into the tarmac, you see these Heinz and these Hoplite helicopters, and then they're war fighting helicopters, and the Russian helicopters, and you're in a war zone when you're flying in and you see aircraft of that magnitude, and there's been a big conflict here. You kind of feel like you're in a war zone now, and you got to keep your wits about you. It's not. When we landed in Cyprus, it was a completely different way of life. Now you're landing in a war zone, and the conflict is still there. So it was hard to take. That things are going to get serious. There's a lot of rebel. There's a lot of destruction. There's a lot of people walking around aimlessly that don't have places to go. They're looking for food to eat. There's a lot of devastation. There's a lot of famine. And then we would deliver as part of the task there. In the first task, we'd be delivering food and clothing for those that had lost everything. That was, I guess, honorable when you would see a family and they were so thankful that you just bought them a sweater and a hat so that they could endure the wintertime. They didn't have winter jackets like we had. They didn't have winter boots like we had. They didn't have all the things that we have in Canada, and everything was stricken and taken away from them. And so when you're giving them something and they're so respectful when they're receiving this stuff, it's very, very honorable, and it's good to receive that.
We get there, we got off the plane. In the terminal there, it's like, okay, here we are. It felt just like a big base because that's what it was, the airfield. But it's also interesting because the buildings, it looks like they're all still shot up and bombed out because, again, it's only 2008, so I guess it's basically 6 years into the war, but they're still establishing stuff. Like, not everything's perfect yet, but it looks like buildings that are still shot up from who knows which war. And it was just very kind of, okay, everybody go here, go there, to the range, zero, make sure your rifle still works, and zeroed in. Briefings, because there's always briefings, lots of them. And even that, is our first few days when we got there, hey, you're staying in these, I'm going to call it a tent, but these things are huge. But it kind of started to get a little bit real because I'm like, okay, instead of, I imagine this big building, just cots, or bunk beds it was, bunk beds? But it's 2 bunk beds surrounded by cinder blocks. And I'm like, oh, at first it's it's for privacy maybe. And then I'm like, or it's not for privacy, it might be just for protection. Yeah, and then eventually move into our other tents, which was more comfortable than those. But
I had never really did any traveling before. It was really interesting going to Afghanistan because you get on a military plane. When you start flying out there, you stop for gas, right? And I had never been to Europe. We stopped in Zagreb, get gas, and then we go to inside the terminal as they're fueling up, and you see a woman sitting at the bar and she's smoking inside with one of these long European cigarettes. I'm like, well, this is new. Okay, so that's the first little bit of culture shock. I guess very minor one, but it was different. We landed in the UAE, and that's a big culture shock, right? The different state of dress, different, culture, everything, different look. Okay, well, that's also different. Now you're not even just changing the cigarette, you're changing everything. And then when we landed in Afghanistan, everything was different. And that was the culture shock. One of our first road moves out of off base, I think it was just like an administrative road move for different things. We had a flat tire, so we had to change a tire or something like that. A jingle truck drove by, and a jingle truck is just like an oversized dump truck, but it's for transporting goods and whatever. But they decorate them. top to bottom, like little things that jingle and flashy things and stuff like that. That was probably one of our first times off base, and you're like, what the heck is that? I think that was one of the first times that I realized we're not in Kansas anymore. It's like, okay, a jingle truck. What is it's very interesting.
And we had this woman that she used to work in a restaurant or a 5-star hotel. And because of the war and stuff, the hotel was blowing up. So they had found her, and they had brought her to what we call a platoon house. And it's basically the place that we stay in. And they had made her one of our cleaners. Unbeknownst to them, she had run the hotel as their chief cook. And so we became very good friends. And when I had a little problem with one of our cooks, I had told my warrant officer, the big guy, that, this cook he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. You either get rid of him or there's going to be problems. And so he had made her a chief cook, and the food was out of this world. And she used to call me her little son. She became so comfortable in our platoon house. Before she left, she made every soldier there a pair of slippers. She knitted a pair of slippers for every one of the soldiers there. Meals are very important. I mean, when you're out on a long range patrol and you come back, and I mean, it could be as much as a hot bowl of soup, and it's so gratifying because you know that you haven't done nothing for the whole day. You're out there, you're fighting the elements, you're stressed out because you're looking for things, and you're in areas that potentially you could have been shot. And so the stress level is so high, but when you come back, that little plate of food makes a big difference.
So I was in it's called a force protection platoon. So we kind of had two main jobs. We did kind of like camp security at one of the entry points for both vehicles and local persons coming into work in the camp. And then we also did, we call them convoy escorts, or the term they used, combat logistics patrol, I think they called it. Basically, we were there to guard all the resupplies going out to all the smaller, from the MiG camp, all the resupplies going out to the other camps. We were there to guard them. Our job was to protect all the convoys going from CAF to the FOBs. Yes. There was 3 or 4 of our vehicles to who knows how many, fuel, food, trucks, whatever. It was basically 3 of them in the vehicle and then me, just kind of start getting the lay of the land. It was interesting. I don't remember everywhere we went. We went to, I think, Camp Nathan Smith, and I do remember stopping and getting out when we were in the city somewhere, and I was just kind of like at that point you're new, so it's like the boogeyman's around every corner, so you're sitting there like nonstop checking, I gotta check that one. Okay, is he here? Nothing. That was just a patrol. We went out, we came back, nothing really crazy happened.
When our first trip to the platoon house, so we were ripping out a American unit. So we were trading spots with an American unit. They were going home. So we were going out to the platoon house to relieve them, and the platoon hid an ID. Somebody set off an ID underneath the lav in front of us. And that was scary. They kept telling us no IDs at night. Well, we were driving at night. We were behind schedule. It was nighttime. They don't have NVGs. They don't have anything like that. So we're not totally relaxed, but we're not expecting trouble. And then an ID goes off. And you're like, is this actually happening? Is this real? Yes, it is. People start doing things like their drills. People are firing up into the mountains. We're exiting in the complete darkness and just kind of waiting for further. In the end of the day, that was the only thing that happened that night, was an ID went off. Nobody got hurt. It was a baby ID. Because Canada had just moved down from Kabul, the locals had no idea what they were dealing with when it came to labs. So it was a small ID. Blew off some plating, but I think it blew off a tire. It was bad enough to, I guess, concuss somebody inside, but I don't think they weren't injured really seriously at all. Yeah, that was the first scary moment.
We were in Bosnia on the first tour. We were in a place called Lipik, and we had to go and do a patrol. They were down in our particular area. There were minefields that were sort of marked, but I mean, you can't see them. And we were going across this one particular bridge, and I was the commander for the vehicle, so I was in the vehicle telling my driver where to go. And I looked over the embankment underneath the bridge, and I could see 4 mines sitting in the bridge. And then the realization kicks in that those weren't lifted. You know they were real mines. It gives you the realization that you're in a war zone. You're not. Those aren't toys. Those are actual mines. And what comes over you is, I may have to combat that someday. I may have to, end up in a minefield and have to get out of a minefield. That the realization is there, and it's not games anymore.
One of our crews ended up getting attached to another organization to go out for the day. And then we also had other people in our platoon also out doing a convoy escort that day as well. And so they can hear radio from the Taliban. They can hear their radios. And so what I find out after, well, we're just driving through the city, and I'm just sitting there, just driving my truck, keeping an eye out, but like, as far as I know, nothing's going on. We find out after is they had a car, SV, suicide vehicle borne IED, basically a car bomb, rolling through the city, trying to find us to hit us because we were their target that day. And they knew they would have spotters all the way down the highway, so they know who's leaving the CAF, they know who's leaving the airfield, and they saw us leaving, and that's who they wanted to hit, was us, because the people we were with are usually higher ups. That's kind of the people we were rolling with. Yeah, they were apparently they were targeting us. Never found us, or they got confused by something, but they didn't hit us that day. But they were driving around targeting us, which is interesting when one of your closest friends is listening to that. And I'm oblivious to it, but he's sitting there listening, almost stressing out because of what he can hear or understands going on. And I'm just sitting there, just driving my truck, driving my RG around. And it's odd time it makes you wonder, like, how many other things were we targeted and we don't know? Like, how many IEDs did somebody hit the button and it didn't go? How many times did maybe I drove, my tire went here and the pressure plate was here and I just missed hitting something?
As A Company, we didn't get into a lot of firefights that whole tour. We were the IED guys. Like, we kept getting hit by IEDs. We were going up and down what they called IED Alley at the time. So the Americans were getting ripped apart before we got there, just going up and down the same road over and over again. Charlie Company got a lot of the firefights. There's a big firefight. A Canadian got killed. We went to go support Charlie Company. We're up on this big, I can't remember the name of it. There's a big hill with a fob on top, Fort Operating Base. Americans were there, Canadians were there. Because they had put this attack in on the fob, the commander's like, you know what, we're not putting up with this. We know where this guy lives. We're gonna go to his house. And so that was one of the first times that I'm like, okay, now we're gonna go pick a fight. Now we're going there to stir stuff up. There was some tension there. I always talk, when I was talking to the troops, the worst part of an engagement is not the actual engagement itself, for me particularly. It's the lead up. Especially like when you're like here on the radio, like you can hear the enemy talking because they don't use secured comms. You can hear them talking about what they're gonna do and how they're moving around. It's like kind of like a build up and a build up and a build up. And your mouth is getting dry and your hands feel weak and stuff like that. But as soon as that first shot fires, your training kicks in. You're not thinking about it anymore. I think that was a valuable lesson, realizing that for my life, especially as for what I do now. Yeah, it's usually the build-up that's the biggest tense part.
On the first tour, you established some friends, and you knew what it was about. You knew what the people that couldn't fend for themselves. So you had that gut wrench feeling that, I got to go over there and I've got to do something, as minuscule as it may be. But I gotta make a difference for some people. I mean, obviously you can't save everybody, but I mean, if you can save some people or give some people some peace of mind for what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, it's rewarding. On the second tour was a little more aggressive because some things had flared up, as you all know. Of course, there's a lot of militant groups there, and it's hard to control a group because. And what I mean by that is these militia groups have different areas that they control, but they don't have a known commander for the whole set of groups. So it's hard to control each individual group. So when one group would flare up and they'd fire some shots or some rounds into an area, by the time you got over there and established a ceasefire with that group, this group would fire up. Now they were still the same kind of militant group. They were still Serbians, But then the problem was that by the time you get to this next group, this group back over here would start firing up again. So it was hard to control because you couldn't talk to one commander because there were several commanders dealing with these groups. And it's hard to establish a ceasefire when there's no commander.
We ended up doing a mission where we went in Royal Air Force Chinooks. We ended up having to go to a district to help. Originally it was going to be we were going to stay there, but it ended up being we basically drop supplies and then come back. So we're flying. Still remember that, like, we're kind of doing a bit of this. They had a sling load, I think they call it, like where they have like a pallet tied to the bottom. So I'm sure they don't want to do too much stuff. We're just kind of going like this. Okay. Then we start kind of going like this a bit more. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what's going on. And I, not positive, but I could almost swear I heard like some sort of like countermeasure. Like I hear like a pop, pop, pop or something. Like, I wonder what that was. Somebody else in our platoon, a few days later comes back. Hey, apparently some guy saw us that day. Oh yeah. Yeah, and supposedly this is what I've been told was there was basically RPGs crisscrossing kind of around our helicopter as we were flying through this valley. I'm like, oh, cool, I guess. I don't know. Like, but if you've ever been in a Chinook or you see them in the movie, like you don't really see anything outside. I can see a little bit out the back door, but that's because the ramp's down because there's a guy on a machine gun there, but I don't really see what's going on.
We were doing a meet and greet with a local town. I can't remember the name of the town. It's been years. I'm sure we could find it somewhere. It was my section. We had one lab. We had a couple G-Wagons. We had the platoon commander there. We had those guys that go and meet, like they're the liaison between the military and the town, kind of like the CIMIC guys. I can't remember what the acronym for CIMIC is. And so Trevor Green was our CIMIC guy that day. Super nice guy. We had traveled with him before. So we go to this town. It's a beautiful day. It's not too hot. I'm outer cordon, so I'm across the river, like the dried up riverbed, the Wadi. And then you have the inner cordon around the specific meeting that they're having. Yeah, we'd done these before. Like according to their culture, from what I learned, is that these meetings, you're allowed to meet with your dearest enemy, your worst enemy in the world, and things should be safe, right? You're going there, you're hashing things out, whatever. There should be zero violence, and that's what we were going in believing. Helmets were coming off. We're gonna have a nice conversation, sit down, see what we can do for you, sort of thing. And all of a sudden, my back was turned. I was watching my arcs, and I hear screaming. And so I turn around, and I see this guy with an axe, and he gets shot, killed, dead, right there in front of me. Probably the first time I've ever seen anybody die. And then kind of all hell broke loose. People were screaming for medics. Shots are being fired. You can hear the snap over your head. Grenades are going off. It was a very chaotic point, and all you can do is do what you're trying to do. My job was to be on the outer cordon, so I'm watching my arcs. So they're screaming for a medic. Medic runs off because he was beside me on the outer cordon. So I'm there on the outer cordon by myself, and I'm waiting, and I have no idea what's going on. And I hear Harriers flying over. You can see Harriers, and there's British Harriers at the time. And my 2 IC's in the lab, and he's making radio calls like mad. People are securing the scene. Then Black Hawk comes in, and they're like, Penner, we need you to carry stretcher. So left my position, ran up, and that's the first time I saw Trevor. He's all packed up. From what I understand, the medic did an amazing job. I don't know medicine, but that's what I keep hearing. And I'm carrying one of the handles for the stretchers, 4 of us, and we're going to the helicopter, load him up on the helicopter, and then he's basically gone. Now, for those who don't know, Trevor did survive, and I think he's doing fairly well. He lives out in BC. I think he wrote a book as well. Yeah, that was a crazy moment in my life, and I reflect on it often. Like, I did my job, but I don't know what I could have done more. But you kind of wish you did more. Been a little more aware. Sounded like somebody had come running through the group after the axe wielder guy, he died. Somebody came running through the group and threw a grenade. Well, I saw the grenade go off, but I had no idea where it came from and stuff like that. If I'd seen him running with a grenade, I could have shot him, you hope.
I always train my guys to the best of my ability, to the best of my knowledge. But I always respected my guys. And I always let my guys know that I don't know everything. Just because I'm their boss or I'm their supervisor, we're a team. You know, when you develop a team, there's a lot of knowledge that comes with that. And it's a lot of outside knowledge. And you would have different things that you had to do that required some of that outside knowledge that otherwise those young troops that worked for me would have. And so you dwell on that knowledge. And so it became, even though my troops knew I was the boss, we worked so well together because I didn't give them the perception that I knew everything and that just because I was in command. But when push came to shove, what I emphasized on my guys, and I emphasized it all the time, was the fact that, you know, if I'm giving the tasking and they have suggestions, and I may or may not use those suggestions, because at the end of the day, when I report to my higher boss, the onus is on me. If I feel that they had a good idea, I would use it. If I didn't feel that they had a good idea, obviously I couldn't run with it, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that ultimately has to pay for the decision made during that task. And it worked well for me. My troops always called me Benny. Not in the presence of higher rank, because they were trained well. So when the higher ranks came around, they referred me as Master Corporal or Sergeant or Warrant Officer. But then when the higher ranks left, it was always a relaxed atmosphere. And the troops respected that. And they knew that when the higher ranks came around and they addressed me as my name in the presence of higher ranks, they knew it was coming, because I had to establish that. That's the difference between a professional soldier and one that's not so professional. They know when to use it. And so we had a very good working relationship. And I pride myself on that throughout my whole career.
I don't know if I'll call it a life lesson, but just something I kind of try to do still to this day, and how to treat people. Like I told you, like we would deal with the locals, and a lot of them were like the elders, and the elders in that culture respected, and I felt we treated them very well. We didn't have a lot of issues when we went out on patrols, and I think that was a result of how we treated the elders. I feel like at times it was like, because we treated them well with respect, they would basically tell Taliban or whoever, be like, no, not right now, because they knew they could tell when we were out on patrol, because like our whole platoon would disappear for a while and another platoon would replace us. So they could tell when they knew what we were doing. They knew we were out. And I feel like they almost were like, no, don't hit those guys right now. Which was a lesson I still kind of carry with me today, is I try to treat people how I want to be treated, and respectfully. And that's one of the big ones that's really kind of sticks with me, because there was others we heard about that didn't treat them very well, and they had incidents when they went out. And a lot of times it wasn't that long after a switch out would happen or something would happen. We were very fortunate, or we were just lucky, or we just had the horseshoes up our, you know what, and maybe we were just lucky. But
I think I learned to chill out more. Like my current career, like being a police officer is dangerous. But I can't think of one time in my 15 years that I've ever been scared being a police officer. I don't think, like, you kind of get a little worried, you may be a little anxious going to certain calls, you can start running through your mental prep when you're going to a call if you have time. But I don't remember ever being scared going to a call.
My most lasting memory, I would say my last tour in Bosnia, when we were leaving there, and some of the people that we had provided clothing for and food for, and just getting that thank of gratitude and that hug on the way off the tarmac, and thanking us for being there, and at least giving them peace of mind while we were there, is the most gratifying thing I've ever done.
it was interesting in a sense that it's kind of, I still remember sitting there. So we had to move out of our tent because the next platoon's now moving in. So they sent us basically back to a different one, but now it's another big tent with just cots. Okay, here's your flight outs tomorrow. So here's your bed for tonight. There's 4 or 5 of us from our platoon, or maybe 6, hanging out there just kind of for the day, but nobody really slept because it was just kind of and I think we were flying out at night. So we're just kind of hanging out. It just seems so anticlimactic. Like, it's just like, okay, you guys are done. Go wait there, go home. But I do remember, like, we're sitting there. We still had all our gear on to fly out on that flight out was on the C-17. A couple of us are sitting there, and I just kind of looked at my buddy beside me and just like, kind of do one of these. guess that's it. Time to get on the plane. I don't know what I expected, but it was just very like, all right, we're done. Time to go.
Yeah. So we landed in Edmonton, and I was whisked away to an airport or to a hotel that night. So I didn't even get to say goodbye to the guys that I had been with. Like, we didn't get a proper goodbye. Most of them I've never seen again. I'd say vast majority I've never seen again. I flew home the next day. It was a good response. Like, my family was there. Some of the unit members showed up, stuff like that. It was nice. I wasn't even a driver in Afghanistan. I found myself driving more aggressively here. I was jumpy for a bit. Like, loud bang heard somewhere else that made me jump. Few dreams. Nothing crazy. I think all in all, when I came home, I came off pretty lucky. I wasn't injured in Afghanistan, and then I don't think I had too many mental injuries. No real sleeplessness. I'm not a big drinker. I even stopped smoking for a bit anyways. But I think I came out pretty well unscathed. I hated being there. I did not like being there. But coming home, as nice as being home was, there is something that draws you back.
My message would be to certainly take in what you see from those countries, feel heart-wrenched, because there are people that can't fend for themselves, and somebody has to fend for them. Those people that get involved in those conflicts, they're involved by being driven into those conflicts, and to no choice of theirs. They're not combatants. They don't want to fight a war, but yet they're stuck in those areas. Somebody's got to fend for those people. And I would say it's certainly gratifying if I could go there and I could make somebody feel comfortable in their own country and feel at ease, not realizing that they're going to be killed for that particular day or whatever the case may be. It's a gratifying feeling.
If you live your life just worrying about yourself, it's kind of a sheltered life, I think. So there's an aspect to trying to help others. Got to live real life foreshadowing, but I don't know if that's appropriate for right now. Where I had a local basically tell me as we were getting, I can't remember if it was when we were getting ready to go at some point in the tour. He said something, I gotta really paraphrase here because it's been many years, so it's not perfect in my head. Something like, you guys are doing good, but you need to be here for generations. And if you're not, it's gonna all go back. It's all gone back. Like, the country's probably back to what it was before we even got there.
One piece of advice for being in Afghanistan, like, live in the present, be there. You're there regardless. Like, whether you volunteer or don't volunteer to be in war, like, you've made your decision or the decision's made for you. It's like you're there, so stop worrying about what happens at home. It's only going to be detrimental. Live in the moment, take it all in, take pictures, do what you can to live your best life while there, because either one, you're going to come home and it's just all going to be over with and you'll just have memories, so you better build up those memories, or God forbid the worst should happen and you don't want to be living your last moments, in fear or worrying about other things that shouldn't be worried about.
Now you're a father now. What would you want your kids to know?
I don't know. When we talked, that's part of my motivation actually. Because I don't talk about myself, and I don't talk about a lot of my Army stuff to anybody outside of the Army. What would I want them to know? I don't know. That do what you want to do in life, and your parents will support you. You might not like it, as I learned from my parents, but we will support you, and your parents will support you. They just may not like it, because if my kids came to me and said, "Hey, I want to join the Army," depending on where the world is in 10 or 15 years when they're at that age, well, we'll see how my opinion is of it then. But I don't know what I could really say to them, because I did it. So how can I really tell them not to?
For the new up and coming generation, one of the messages I would say to you is the military is a good structure, and you should always protect what you have. Don't take things for granted. And there are people out there that are living in countries that can't protect themselves. And so somebody has to protect them. And pride yourself on what you have, or pride yourself on what you can give. And if you can give a lending hand, I strongly suggest it. And the military is the place you can do that because it gives you structure and it gives you appreciation and pride.